I woke to the faint rattle of the sliding glass door. At first, I thought it was the wind. The clock read 12:14 a.m. The stillness of the night pressed against the apartment. I tried to settle back into sleep, convincing myself it was nothing. But then I saw it. The curtain shifted slightly, not enough to be the wind, but enough to make my chest tighten. I got up slowly, heart pounding, and crept toward the living room. The latch on the sliding door was unlocked. I didn't remember leaving it that way. My stomach churned. I locked the door and double-checked it, pulling to make sure it wouldn't move. As I turned to head back to bed, something caught my eye. Muddy footprints on the patio outside. I froze. I hadn't been outside all day. A wave of nausea hit me as I scanned the apartment. It was dark and quiet. Nothing seemed out of place, but the feeling gnawed at me. I stepped into the kitchen and reached for the knife block. The largest knife was missing. My hand trembled as I grabbed a smaller blade, the closest thing I had to a weapon. The patio light flickered on. My breath hitched. Someone was out there. A shadow moved at the edge of the light, just past the glass. My grip on the knife tightened, my knuckles white. I backed into the hallway, careful not to make a sound. My phone was in the bedroom. Each step felt too loud, the creak of the floorboards deafening in the silence. I reached my room and locked the door behind me. With shaking hands, I dialed 911. "Someone's here," I whispered into the phone, barely audible. "Stay on the line," the operator said, her voice calm. I slid into the closet, curling into the corner. The air inside was stale, suffocating. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, and I heard it then, the soft slide of the door opening. Someone was inside. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps filled the air. They moved through the living room, pausing every so often. A drawer opened. Something fell to the floor with a dull thud. They knew I was here. I held my breath, clutching the knife close. The steps drew closer, just outside the bedroom door. The knob turned, locked. The door rattled, and I stifled a gasp. The sound stopped. Then the creak of floorboards shifted down the hall toward the back of the apartment. The faint wail of sirens broke the silence. Relief surged through me, but I didn't dare move. The footsteps quickened, retreating toward the sliding door. A loud thud, and then silence. I stayed in the closet until I heard the police calling out, their voices firm and clear. Only then did I crawl out, my legs shaky, the knife still in my hand. They found no one, just the footprints leading away into the darkness, but the latch on the door, it had been cut. The gas station was eerily quiet as I pulled in, my truck's engine rumbling to a stop. It was past midnight, the kind of time when the world feels emptier than it is. I stepped out, the air cool against my skin, and grabbed the nozzle to refuel. The light above flickered. I glanced around. The lot was deserted except for a single car parked near the building. A man stood leaning against it, his face half hidden in the shadow of his hood. He didn't move, just watched. I focused on the pump, trying to ignore the weight of his gaze. Once my tank was full, I headed inside to pay. The clerk was half asleep, barely acknowledging me as I slid cash across the counter. When I walked back out, the man was closer, now standing by my truck. My stomach twisted. "Long night?" he asked as I approached. His voice was calm, but something about it made my skin crawl. "Yeah," I muttered, not stopping. "Where you headed?" I ignored him, climbing into the cab and locking the doors. As I started the engine, he grinned, stepping back but not leaving. I kept my eyes forward and pulled out of the lot, my heart racing as his figure disappeared in the rearview mirror. The relief was short-lived. A minute later, headlights appeared in the distance behind me. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence, but as the miles stretched on, the car stayed there, too close for comfort. He was following me. I gripped the wheel tighter, weighing my options. The road ahead was dark, isolated. The next truck stop was about 10 miles away. I pushed the accelerator, the engine roaring as I put distance between us. For a moment, the headlights dimmed, and I thought he'd given up. But then they reappeared, closer this time. By the time I reached the truck stop, my pulse was hammering. I pulled into the lot, parking near the bright lights of the diner. The car parked a short distance away, its engine idling. I hurried inside, the bell above the door jingling as I stepped into the warm glow of the diner. A waitress looked up, her eyes curious but kind. I took a seat at the counter, my back to the wall, trying to steady my breathing. Minutes later, the door opened, and he walked in. He didn't sit, didn't order. He just stood there, his eyes fixed on me, the same grin on his face. "You okay?" the waitress asked quietly. I nodded, but she didn't seem convinced. She called to the cook in the back, and the man suddenly turned and left, his grin fading. I stayed there for an hour, sipping coffee and watching through the window as his car remained parked near the edge of the lot. He didn't move, didn't leave, just sat there, waiting. When I finally felt safe enough to leave, he was gone. But the memory of his grin lingered long after the road stretched empty before me. The dorm room was quiet except for the soft hum of my laptop. Notes and textbooks were scattered across my desk, illuminated by the desk lamp. Midnight had come and gone, but I wasn't ready to stop. Finals were too close. A faint rustling sound came from outside. I paused, tilting my head to listen. Probably just the wind, I thought. My room was on the second floor with a large tree near the window. The branches scraped against the building often. I went back to typing, the rhythm of the keys steadying my nerves. The noise came again. Closer this time, and I glanced at the window. The blinds were half open, the glass reflecting the glow of my screen. Nothing unusual. Still, my pulse quickened. I forced myself to focus on my notes. Minutes passed, or maybe it was an hour. My eyes burned from staring at the screen too long. I leaned back to stretch and caught it, a flicker of movement in the reflection on my laptop screen. I froze. Slowly, I turned toward the window. Through the gap in the blinds, I saw him. A man stood below, partially hidden by the bushes. He was staring up at me, motionless. My chest tightened, my breath caught in my throat. I dropped to the floor, out of sight. My heart pounded so loud I thought he'd hear it. My phone was on the desk, just out of reach. I crawled toward it, careful not to make a sound. My hand shook as I unlocked it and dialed campus security. "There's someone outside my window," I whispered. "Stay inside. Keep your lights off. We're on our way." I reached up and turned off the desk lamp. The room plunged into darkness, the only light coming from my screen. I stayed low, peeking around the edge of the desk. He was still there. His face was hard to make out, but his posture was calm, almost casual. He didn't move, didn't say anything, just stared. Minutes dragged on like hours. My fingers gripped the phone so tightly they ached. Then he moved. He stepped back into the shadows slowly at first, as if he knew I was watching. Then he disappeared. I stayed where I was until I heard voices outside. A flashlight beam cut through the bushes, and the sound of campus security calling out brought a wave of relief. I ran to the door and let them in, barely able to form words. They searched the area but found nothing. No sign of him. "Wait," one of them said, crouching near the bushes. He pulled out a coiled rope and a pair of gloves. My stomach turned. "He was planning something," the officer said grimly. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Even after the locks were checked and extra patrols were promised, I couldn't shake the feeling that he might come back.